since you've rejected out what we were saying it was. And I've never found a compelling definition. And any definition offered, it's like, well, what's even the point then? Why do we even need this now?
I just don't see how a gay marriage in any way damages a straight marriage.
Okay, friends, welcome once again to Look and Live. You here with Pastor James Devallon, and this is The Perspective. I have for you on the screen right now, guys. We are going to listen to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has a good one here with Matt Walsh. So Matt Walsh is certainly one of the best, from my perspective, political commentator I have ever heard. He's got a common sense and dry humor, and that ability to formulate his argument is something to listen to. Joe Rogan is also one of the biggest podcasts in the world from my perspective. I love how balanced he is on many issues, and also how open and willing he is to listen to different views and perspective. So let's take a listen to this one. This one here is entitled Joe Rogan, Matt Walsh Disagree Over Gay Marriage. Without further ado, let's get to it.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
I think of marriage is a certain thing, which is the context for procreation, for the building of the nuclear family.
What about people that get married that don't have kids? Are you opposed to that? What if they get married, they decide, you know what, we don't need kids, I'm going to get fixed, you get your tubes tied, let's travel the world?
Well, what do you mean am I opposed to it? I mean, I think that every married couple should be open to life.
But what if they don't want to? Are you opposed to them being married? If marriage is only for procreation and to bond a family together, what about people that are deeply in love that never want to have children?
I don't think it's not only procreation, but that is one of the fundamental definitional aspects of it. Of course, there's more to marriage just than that.
And what about people that are infertile? They fall in love and they realize that they can have babies and they don't really necessarily want to adopt. Is that okay for them to be married? Because then by definition, marriage falls into a completely different thing, because then it's a bond of love. It's a union of love.
Sure. I mean, that doesn't change the nature of marriage, though. It's a little bit like I say that what's the definition of a woman? Well, a woman is someone who by her nature can conceive children in her womb and bear children. And then the response is always, well, what about women who are infertile? Does that destroy your definition of woman? And it doesn't, because it's still a woman's nature to bear children. Not every woman will, and there will be disease and infertility and old age and all these things that will preclude that, but it's still of her nature to do so.
This is a very interesting discussion for a number of reasons. Number one, you're listening to two different worldview, two very different worldview. There is the secular and the spiritual. So Matt Walsh certainly has the spiritual component worldview, and here is Joe Rogan with the secular component worldview. And when you listen from both perspectives, what they are saying, essentially they're saying almost the same thing. The only difference is in the definition. So I'm very anxious to see where this is going, and I'll comment some more. I know this is a 40 minutes video, so I don't want to keep stopping it. So let's continue.
And I would say the same thing for marriage. I mean, it is natural in a marriage for procreation to occur. Mm-hmm. It's not always going to happen in reality, though, but that's still one of the natural functions of marriage. And married couples who can't conceive children, there are other ways to be parents, like adoption, for example.
If they want to. Right. Sure. But if people want to be married and don't want to ever have children, are you opposed to them being married?
Well, I wouldn't advocate a law that would prevent it.
But would it change the definition of what their marriage is to you, because they don't want to have a family? They just want to have a loving bond?
I think this would be a couple that is rejecting one of the fundamental aspects of marriage, and they should be open to life. I would hope that in the future they would be, but
isn't that just a personal choice? I mean, you can have a very fulfilling life if you just follow your pursuits and your dreams and your interests, and you find someone that shares those interests with you and you share time together. It's very fulfilling and loving.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, in that I'm not advocating for like a law that says that you if you're married you have to have X number of kids.
But then why are you opposed to two gay people doing that?
Well, because again, it's not about choice. It's about what this institution, marriage is an institution, and what is it, and what purpose does it serve? And I do not agree with tearing down or changing this definition, especially because the people who have changed the definition haven't come up with a new one. So they say, well, that's not what marriage is. So for thousands of years, we said marriage is the procreative union. And then we had the other side that came along and said, well, it's not that. Okay, well then, like, what is it exactly? And
very good point that he's making here. While there are so many who say, okay, marriage is not this, marriage is not that according to them, but they really have not given us a new definition of marriage. And also, it's a very muggy discussion for a number of reasons, because there is the culture definition of marriage and how it is carried out. And there is the biblical definition of marriage and how it is supposed to be carried out. So while I respect the cultural aspect of this thing and however it is defining the culture, it is what it is. I understand and I get it, but it doesn't change the original purpose or the meaning or the intent of the institution by the author of the institution, which is God. So when you go back to what God intended for marriage to be, comparing to how our culture defines it today in a sinful culture where different aspects and different people, a different background, ethnicity comes in to the picture, I get it, but it's like, it still doesn't change God's order. Does it make sense? So this is a really good discussion though, because it's kind of giving you a worldview that is very prevalent in the world today, that these two worldviews are clashing in a really respectable manner, which I actually appreciate.
Said, well, it's people who love each other. Two people love each other. Well, but then why two people? Why do they have to love each other? All these kinds of questions. You get into what if they're in the same family? What if brothers and sisters want to marry? And I know every time that comes up, the advocates for gay marriage will say, well, that's a slippery slope argument. That's a fallacious, but it's actually not. It's like we're trying to get to what do you even think this institution is now, since you've rejected out what we were saying it was. And I've never found a compelling definition. And any definition offered, it's like, well, what's even the point then? Why do we even need this now?
I just don't see how a gay marriage in any way damages a straight marriage. I don't see it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems to me that people want to be look, if you wanted to look at logic, especially in our modern society, which is pretty fucked when it comes to relationships, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of all marriages end in divorce anyway. They don't make it. I don't know if anything would damage marriage and damage the institution of marriage is the option of divorce. I don't think gay people getting married in any way, shape, or form changes a bond that you have with your wife.
Okay, this is where I think Rogan has gone a little bit, I would say, left field. There needs to be a level of tolerance and respect for different view and perspective on marriage in a secular world. I get it. And I still have an issue with the legal aspect of marriage, because whenever the government get into stuff, they mess everything up. I have an issue with that. Less government, the better. But when you're talking about marriage and saying it doesn't have an impact on you and your wife, it doesn't, but it has an impact on society as a whole, because it redefines that which God had put together as an order. And also, there's another thing to keep in mind. If you destroy the definition or redefine marriage, or you destroy the original components that goes into marriage, right? Male and female, you change that, it opens the door for everything else. You have to understand, everything else now is welcome. Whatever form, polygamy or transgender or, asexual, transsexual, whatever it is, right? All of these different components of sexual orientation as our culture know it today, they are welcome into that definition, that new definition of marriage. And this is what we also have to look at, because you can't push them away, because all they do is they take the new definition and they redefine it to suit them. So you also have to respect them, and therefore the whole idea of marriage is imploding, right in our face. So this is the danger, and I think Joe Rogan might not be seeing that. Again, it's coming from a secular perspective, and I understand.
Just called marriage. It's a human invented thing.
This is where I have to disagree again. Marriage is not a human invented thing. There is no single human on earth who can say, I'm the one who instituted marriage. That's actually bogus. That man has never come forward because he doesn't exist. It's a godly thing. Marriage is actually a very spiritual thing. It's a religious institution. And I know Matt Walsh probably not going to challenge him on that one, but he should have, because this is where the secular world has it twisted. Marriage is a biblical institution, ordered and ordained by God, instituted by God, and it has a purpose not only to procreate, but also to reflect the image of God, which is where Matt Walsh is missing a big key here in the discussion, although I know he's not trying to spiritualize everything, because he's having a secular and open discussion about this matter with an individual who is not spiritually minded. But I don't think it helps his argument when you keep Joe Rogan away from this truth. Marriage is more than just about having babies and a love union between the two individuals. That is essential, of course. Marriage ultimately is for the purpose to reflect the glory of God. You got to get that. The image of God is best revealed through the marriage institution between a man and a woman. Okay? That is Bible.
We decide that gay people can get married too. I just don't see how it damages anything. I don't think it tears down the definition of marriage in any way. It just opens up the possibility that people who are gay won't be discriminated against.
Yeah, I don't think that a gay couple existing directly impacts. There's a gay couple and wherever, and I'm with my wife in our house. Like, obviously,
Right.
there's not. But I'm not talking about on the individual level. I'm talking about on the societal level.
Right.
I would agree that divorce, especially this no-fault divorce, rampant divorce, I don't think it's as high as 50%. I know that's often quoted. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it is high. It's too high. And
Chris Rock has a great joke about that. He said those are just the people with the courage to get out. Like, how many cowards stay?
But it's also true that the advocates for what we call now traditional marriage, which I just call marriage, but the advocates for traditional marriage put themselves at a disadvantage by especially in the churches, like allowing this rampant divorce to occur. Mm-hmm. And then you've already sort of given up on some marriage is supposed to be monogamous and permanent, as well as procreative. Well, you've given up monogamy and permanence, and so now it's not. That's two of the three legs gone, and so now this assault was waged on the procreative part of it, and it was difficult to withstand it because the institution had already been weakened. So I agree with you there, but my answer to that is to try to reinforce what marriage is, not to just give up on it entirely. And I still think you're left with this question of, like, if marriage is not what I'm saying it is, then why do we even need it? What's the point? I mean, you're saying it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
But you're also, like, the way that you're presenting it, it's also a totally meaningless institution.
No.
They don't need it at all.
No, it's not meaningless. It's because it means something to the people that get married.
So it's just a subjective, symbolic thing. I mean, what?
Yeah.
So if you're
kind of what it is. Look, there's a massive responsibility when you're married and when you have children to keep your family together and you raise and keep everybody happy and healthy. And there's great reward to that. Yeah. But it doesn't always work out. It's people change. People are fucked up. It doesn't always work. And so I don't think it should be outlawed because 50% of the people fall apart. Just like I don't think it has any effect whatsoever on a straight couple if a gay couple decides that they want to make it official. And that's what it is to them. It gives them a feeling that they're accepted and appreciated and that they're not discriminated against because they happen to be homosexual.
Again,
that's
that's the secular. The secular has all these reasons for it, which I respect it though. You know, I don't really have an issue. As far as I'm concerned, homosexuals, you can do whatever you want. But here is the fact that a lot of us are not going to accept, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The moment two men or two women get married, all right, according to the world's definition of marriage, it is actually not marriage. Now, it's something else. It's a union. And the definition of marriage in itself, and I'm going to show you this at the end of the video, it has to include God, right? And it has to be between a man and a woman. And there's a commitment in that. There are vows in that. And the children and everything else that comes along are part of the rewards. They are not necessarily the reason, the definition in itself. They are part of the benefit of the institution as a whole. So, but let them finish. We'll come back to that.
Is the damage that's done by gay marriage to the institution of marriage.
But how is it done? How is that in any way damage straight people?
Because we are making the institution meaningless.
Yeah.
But it's not meaningless.
Well, but you just said
it's true. It's true. It's just, if you redefine it, it's kind of like, think of it this way. It's like you take a something that was in its original, it was potent, right? It was well done. And you start adding sugar, water, or whatever it is. You sugarcoat whatever that thing is. As a result, it is no longer what it was meant to be. It doesn't taste the same, doesn't feel the same. It is still named that thing, but it's no longer the original. And I think what we have by the culture definition of marriage, you know, today is what I call a counterfeit version of marriage. It is accepted in the culture, but here is the fact though. It is not accepted by God. And I know some homosexuals who watch my channel might think I'm being homophobic. No, I'm not. It's just not going to be accepted by God because God already says this in his word. And he has the original institution in himself by definition. So the world can do whatever they want to do. But as a believer, I want to do what God wants me to do. You know, understand? So, and I have to tell you the truth, even though for some of you, it is uncomfortable, but I get it. But the thing is, you cannot redefine something that God himself has put together in this or that fashion. It just cannot be done. We can do it in this culture, but in heaven, from God's perspective, it is a counterfeit. It is a fake version of the original.
Meaningful to the people that have it.
Subjective, symbolic, and it's about your own personal feelings.
Isn't it though?
Well, no, I would say that it's not.
Well, if it's not subjective and it's not symbolic,
it codifies and protects and gives a name to a thing that actually exists, which are man, woman couples creating people, creating babies,
but not always.
True. Right, but again, that's still the nature of the union. So,
but what are the percentage of people today that are married that don't have children? I bet it's pretty high amongst heterosexuals.
Probably.
Is there something wrong with that?
I think there is something wrong with that. I think there is something wrong with getting married and saying, oh, we're not going to have any kids at all.
But why is there something wrong with that if someone's personal choice? Well, why is it wrong that two people are like, I am deeply committed to work and I don't want to sacrifice any of my career and I don't want to ruin a kid because I'm constantly at the office, but that's where I get deep satisfaction and that's what I'm focused on. Mm-hmm. And the woman says, that's great because I don't want children either. I really am attached to my interests and my career and what I like to do. That's not damaging your relationship with your wife and your family. I certainly don't think of it as a threat to my marriage or my family.
Yeah, it is a personal choice.
Right, but shouldn't people be allowed to make those personal choices? Like, isn't that a fundamental aspect of what it means to be American, to have that freedom?
Well, right, yeah, but right now we're not talking about what people are allowed to do. I'm not saying
Well,
that.
we're talking about marriage, gay marriage.
Okay, we were just discussing straight couples who choose
Straight
not to have
couples
kids.
choose.
Yeah.
That's also a personal freedom issue,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that straight couples should be legally required to have kids. But I, if you're asking me, do I think it's the right choice to just get married and choose not to have kids ever? I do not think that that's the right choice. It's their choice, but people can make choices that are wrong. And you can disagree.
How is it wrong if they have a fulfilling and wonderful life together with that choice? If their thing is that they just want to have a bond between the two of them to just like take it to the next level, let everybody know like we are married. If I die, my money's going to go to Helen. And if Helen dies, I'm going to mourn her because she was my wife and now I'll be a widower. Like to some people, that distinction gives them peace and security and makes them feel better about the relationship, that they're both so committed.
I get where Joe Rogan is coming from. And Joe Rogan is making a lot of sense here from, again, a secular perspective. It still doesn't mean the contemporary definition of marriage as we know it today. And whatever that definition is, we still don't even have one. That doesn't really change the original. Are we clear? It doesn't change it because it only says whatever that original is or was, I'm just redefining it according to my desires, which you can have your desires, but when you go back to what God intended for marriage to be, the original is still the one that God recognizes. The new one we have today is just something else.
That they've legally signed documents that say that they're bound by law and under the eyes of God or whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
They're able to make that choice, but I think you're still rejecting one of the purposes of marriage. And in the scenario that you just outlined, you're also deciding to live a really self-centered life. You're saying,
well, what if you're not? What if your work is very charitable? What if it benefits humanity in a deep way? What if you spend a lot of time doing...
Getting a lot of what ifs, a lot of what ifs. Joe Rogan is also somewhat of a thinker. But what he's lacking in his argument, though, is biblical context. And I know he's coming with being an atheist and everything. That's why he thinks this way. And I don't expect anything different. But this is the thing that a lot of people don't get. If you get rid of the original definition of marriage, right, and we come up with something else as we know it today, everything else is welcome. Let me tell you something. You see this woke ideology that is so prevalent today that a lot of people are pushing back against? It could not exist and be as strong as it is today without the new definition of marriage. It could not exist. If the original definition of marriage was kept and respected in a culture and the government did not stick their nose in it and supposedly pass laws, legislate that new definition, we probably wouldn't be seen as much as a deterioration of the family structure, faith and freedom, and many other issues that we now are experiencing in the culture. It probably wouldn't be as prevalent as it is today. I can bet you on that.
Healthcare work and social work, and you're deeply committed to your community. It's not selfish at all. You're just dedicating your time to something other than raising new human beings. But you're dedicating your life to enhancing other human beings that are around you.
That's a hypothetical.
It is a hypothetical, but so is yours, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the people that choose, like, we're not going to have kids, and the rate of those rates are declining, and the age when people first have kids is also going up, and all of that.
Yeah.
And most of the people that are making these choices, I don't think it's because they're involved in charity work. I do think that it is more the scenario you outlined in the first time around, which is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. I have my job. I don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
Because
But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever the fuck they want to do. And they don't necessarily have to have kids to live a fulfilling life that way. And if they choose to do that with someone who they have a loving bond with and who they get married to, I don't think it's a bad thing that they don't want to have kids.
Well, I guess we have to, maybe we're running into a question of, now you get to the real fundamental question.
I think it's a fundamental freedom thing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, I guess, on the freedom aspect of it, because again, I'm not saying that you should be required to have kids.
But you're imposing your sensibilities and what you think is important in life to other people. But everybody has a different idea of what's important in life without hurting anyone. The thing is, like, what I'm saying is these people that are married, that don't have children, they're not harming anyone. They're not harming these unborn children that they never have. They're not harming anyone. And it doesn't affect your relationship with your family and your marriage at all.
Yeah, but I'm also...
Joe Rogan is missing a lot of things here, because he's looking at harming people from the perspective of physical harm or destroying another person's family. That's not what happens when we have the new definition of marriage, the contemporary version of marriage, the modern version of marriage, what I refer to as a counterfeit version. What it also does is that it may not do anything to my marriage or anybody else's, but what it does, it leaves society in a very confusing state. So the definition that we now accept makes the new generation that ought to come looking at marriage from a perspective that is like, we who actually understand the original are looking at that and say, this stuff has gone wild. And you have to also see the connection between this new definition of marriage and all the other issues we have going on in our world today. They're very much connected.
I'm not imposing myself on them or harming them by answering a question about how I feel about their choices.
Right, but nor are gay people doing that to you.
I think the harm comes from, on a societal level, when we start breaking down these basic central institutions, like the institution of the family and of marriage. That's where the harm comes from. And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective. It's just about making you feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in. The worse it is, and people are going to reject marriage, and that means more. Fewer kids are being born. Also, more kids are being born in a context where they don't have that stable family structure. So the harm definitely comes. It may not be this immediate, connect the dots thing, but and we can already see that.
This was a very fruitful discussion, and I think both have done a great job sharing their perspective. There was a very balanced approach and very respectable approach about it as well. Joe Rogan did a great job expressing his view. Matt Walsh did also a good enough job, and I think Matt Walsh was off by not aiming at the biblical side of the story, because without that, no definition of marriage could be good enough to a person who is secular in the mind, as Joe Rogan is. And I think when Joe Rogan doesn't like biblical discussion also, he kind of goes a little crazy, topsy-turvy whenever biblical stuff is brought up. I know this on his podcast, but that wouldn't change me, because my argument would always be that God instituted marriage, because that's what it is. God defines what marriage is, and God also tells us what the purpose of marriage actually is. Not men, not the culture, not the United States, not the Supreme Court. They do not have anything to do with God's original intent. We can respect decisions that are made As Christians, we should. But what we do not respect is the violation of God's law. There's no respect for that. So, nevertheless, it was a great talk. I appreciate it. I love this kind of discussion. At least they were respectable about it. Nobody died. There was no gunshot, which is good. Listen to this. The Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helpmeet for him." So God was so intentional after he created Adam. He intentionally did not give Adam a woman. So he allowed Adam to see all the animals and their pairs and, lovely coming together. And Adam realized something was missing. So God kind of brought this institution together as a result of understanding that Adam was missing something. So God put Adam to sleep, took one of his rib, and out of the rib of Adam, he created the woman. So it's a beautiful thing. And when you notice how this comes about, it tells you that Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." And there goes the institution of marriage right there. This is it. It tells you, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife." You gotta get what God is saying here. It doesn't say a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his husband, as the world will say. God only recognizes marriage between a man and a woman. Nothing else, nothing more. This is not to be disrespectful. This is not to say I hate you. It has nothing to do with that. This is God. This is his institution. This is his order. And when he created Adam and Eve, he brought those two together. And the Bible tells us in Genesis 1, if I may go there, in Genesis 1, you find this image of God component in verse, I think it's 26. Oh my goodness. That is so fast. Okay. Yeah, there you have it. So God created men in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. God blessed them and said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over it, over the sheep of the sea, over the fowls of the air, over everything that move on the earth." So there you have what Matt Walsh was saying. Matt Walsh was also correct when he says we're supposed to be procreating, right? Having babies. Yeah, God intended for that to happen here in the Garden of Eden, especially when there were nobody else around, which I don't believe today. We need to have a whole lot of children, especially when we see how crazy this world could be. And it's not easy. It's very expensive today. If you're going to bring life into this world, you got to be intentional about what you're doing and how willing are you to care and love them. Anyway, much more could be said, but I would like to end it right here. What do you think? What say you? Share me your perspective on this matter. Do you take a stand for the original definition of marriage, or do you go with the modern contemporary version of marriage? Do you believe it is wrong for two men or two women to get married? Do you believe it is okay? Do you believe God is okay with it? Let me know below. Let's talk. I have my perspective. You heard it. You can agree and disagree with me, but listen, the Bible is my book. I try to live by it. I seek to believe what the Bible says, and I try to live and experience and order my life according to that. As far as your choice is concerned, I respect it for what it is. Until next time, God bless you. And as always, remember to look unto Jesus, to live by faith. Have a good one. Bye.